It is 3 weeks since Israel has begun its relentless bombardment of the Gaza Strip, and since then, the besieged Gaza Strip has witnessed an enormous number of deaths. The Gazans are suffering. The calls for a truce, however, is getting louder from the rest of the world. But the bombardment by the Israelis has become much more fierce in the last 18 odd hours. We try to sum up the pain and the suffering and the desperation of the Palestinian people who are caught in this mind-numbing violence. Take a look.
במצב הזה אנחנו לא יכולים להניח את נשקנו, כי אם אנחנו נניח את נשקנו אנחנו פשוט לא נהיה. וזאת התחושה כרגע, שאנחנו ממש נלחמים על קיומנו ברמה הכי בסיסית.
الطيران هذا اللي بيخبط فينا. هاي حتى الآن في ناس من تحت الأرض مش عارفين يطلعوها. حتى الآن. أنا يعني إلي أخت في البريج هي وأولادها وجوزها راحت. مش قادر أروح أشوف.
WION World in Tel Aviv is part of the state of Israel, and we have to clarify with all of us under attack, and the world has to understand that we are going to fight and we are going to win.
Thank you very much.
هم قاعدين في بلدهم، بدهم يموتوا في بلدهم، ما بيطلعوا من بلدهم. هذه أرضنا وقبورنا وحياتنا وأكلنا وشربنا فيها. طلوع ما بنطلع إلا لما تطلع أرواحنا.
I'm waiting for him every day. I'm praying to God to bring him and everybody home. Israel is now in trauma, big trauma, but it's not about Israel and Palestinian, it's about the world. It's about the future of the world.
صحينا على صوت قوي. ما عرفناش ننام. أول ليلة تمر علينا صعبة الليلة. وعندك النت انقطع وهاي خلونا نرجع نعبي لنا المية وخش الحياة صعبة.
One of 9 million Israeli citizens who are here to support the hostages' families, strengthen them and bring the story to the world so that the whole world pressures the barbarian terrorists to send back the hostages immediately.
كل اللي كانوا موجودين هان مواطنين وأبرياء، والغارات اللي نزلت على بيوتنا وعلى دورنا وإحنا في قلبها، والحمد لله رب العالمين. طلعنا من تحت الأنقاض وربنا سلمنا، ولكن ما ظلش ولا بيت ولا ظل أي حاجة، وربنا أكرم الحمد لله رب العالمين. ربنا أكرمنا بأكم شهيد، ونسأل الله ربنا لهم الرحمة وربنا يغفر لهم.
All right, now to try and help make sense of what is happening at this moment in the Gaza Strip, we're being joined by Dr. Gilbert Doctorow, who is in fact an international affairs analyst, an author and also a historian, and he's joining us live from Brussels. Now, Dr. Doctorow, we have been witnessing a new phase in this war for the last 18 plus hours. What's in fact happened is that all means of communication within the Gaza Strip have been cut off. The Israeli army says that its tanks and other armored vehicles are still inside of the Gaza Strip. Now, what do you expect is likely to happen from here on? Is this a big, full-scale invasion to the Gaza Strip that the Israelis are attempting?
Perhaps. they're playing their cards very close to the chest. But although there is a news blackout, or intended news blackout, as a result of the destruction of the communications infrastructure by the Israelis, images do come out. Reporting is coming out. And I'd like to underline
I'll tell you how the images are coming out. So the only way the images are still coming out of the Gaza Strip is with some of these big international news media who have access to these satellite phones. They are separate, but communication within the Gaza Strip is completely off. So if someone wants to call an ambulance or wants to check on what's happening with their relatives within the Gaza Strip, they simply can't do it.
Indeed. That is the inhumane nature of the ongoing Israeli attack. At the same time, the world is watching, and what you see on major international broadcasters is exactly what I see when I turn on Russian news. That is to say, the world is one in following the catastrophe unfolding in Gaza, which is being wrought by the Israeli army. And where do we go next? I think it is premature to say that it all depends on the Israeli generals. It depends as much on the neighbors of Israel, who are watching but are unlikely to remain sitting on their hands. Yes, it was very interesting to listen to and to watch part of President Erdogan's statements to a gathering of between 500,000 and 1.5 million demonstrators in support of Palestine.
Absolutely.
And yes.
You know, my question to you, Doctor, my question to you is, you know, at the time that this conflict started, there was a widespread international approval for Israel's actions. Everyone came out and said that Israel has a right to defend itself. But now, with more and more images of absolute carnage coming out of the Gaza Strip, more than 7,700 civilians have ended up losing their lives. 3,000 plus children have ended up getting buried underneath the rubble of these bombs that are being dropped by the Israelis. With this, the public sentiment internationally is actually now changing. It is going against the Israelis, and sooner rather than later, even the Americans, I'm pretty sure the American leadership would also be forced to in fact say something to that effect. How much longer do you think Israel has with it to try and go along with the public sentiment? Because sooner rather than later, because of the images, the horrific carnage that's being inflicted on civilians, the sentiment has now gone completely against Israel.
And that sentiment was measured in the General Assembly vote yesterday. What is interesting here is that 120 countries backed the Jordanian resolution calling for an immediate ceasefire, and also speaking against any attempt at a forced removal of the Palestinians from Gaza to some other as yet undesignated location. So that is 120 voted for that resolution. 45, I believe, abstained, among them, incidentally, India and all of the European countries, and 14 only voted against, of which the most prominent country was the United States. What we see here, compared to the vote back in February on the Russian military action in Ukraine, is a total reversal of global sentiment with regard to these two superpowers and who is doing what. The United States now, which claims still to be the global leader and whose leadership is deemed to be indispensable, has proven to be in a tiny minority in the international political diplomatic community. That it's a tiny minority in the global community on the ground, people, ordinary people, is obvious as can be. From the demonstrations going on in Europe and, as I mentioned, in Istanbul. And how long can the Israelis continue? Well, the imponderable here is just when will the neighbors act? So far they haven't. But I do not believe this can go on much longer without Israel facing a two-front war.
Absolutely, indeed. Thank you very much indeed, Dr. Off, for joining us and getting us your perspective on this. WION is now available in your country. Download the app now and get all the news on the move.